Yo, what's up, dudes? I got my main man, Jon Finn here. Jon, welcome to the basement. Let's wrap this up in a little bit, but before we do, I know you did something with Truefire recently. Didn't you do something with them? You've done more than one, or you've just done that one?
I've done 2 projects for Truefire. One of them, excuse me, I'm trying to tune here. The first one that I did is called Modal Rock Soloing.
Okay, I knew it had mode in it. I knew it. Yeah.
And what that one is it essentially explains the theory of how modes work, how you can figure out how modes work against certain types of chord progressions. And then there's also a whole thing about characteristic notes within each of the modes has its own characteristic note. That when you play that note, that note will like for example in Lydian, if you get to the sharp 4, you're sort of telegraphing to the world that you're playing Lydian.
Right.
You know,
and it's funny because it's not only what it is but what it's not. So like a lot of times I'll say, well, Mixolydian is not just about the flat 7, it's also about the natural 3.
That's right.
Because if it doesn't have a natural 3, you're in Dorian, right?
That's
and
right.
then once you get to Dorian, then it's all about the natural 6. Because if it wasn't a natural 6,
that's right,
it'd be Aeolian. So it's on both sides of each mode you get this changed. So there's really, once you get past Lydian, I always find, or even Ionian, there's really 2 notes, right? It's the note that you just added, and then it's the note you're about to add.
That's exactly right.
Right.
And that's one of the things that the video series, just lays out a system that I developed a little while ago, and it's based on the idea that it's when you're learning modes, there's 3 ways you can define modes. Number 1. A mode is a major scale starting from a different degree other than the first. For example, a Dorian scale is an Ionian scale or a major scale starting from a 2nd degree.
Right.
Second definition is a mode is a major scale with altered notes. For example, a Dorian scale is a major scale with a flatted 3rd and 7th.
Right.
Okay. A third way is pentatonics with notes added. Okay, so for
Probably
example,
how I think.
Well,
how a lot of us think.
A lot of people think that way. Yeah.
I think more off of the major scale, but yeah.
Yeah. So, like for example, a Dorian scale is a minor pentatonic scale with a natural 6 and natural 2 added.
Right.
Okay, and what's cool about that is you'll realize that all the minor modes, have their characteristic notes either as a 2 or a 6 or both.
Right.
The major modes are all either 4 and 7.
Right.
So, like if you go through the whole system top to bottom, it really explains that whole thing in a lot of detail, and gives some suggestions for ways to identify it with chord progressions, and there's also a bunch of backing tracks and a bunch of exercises you can solo on top of.
Cool. I'll leave a link in the description for all this stuff.
Okay.
Then the other thing, before we get off modes and we get on the second one, is you had a column one time, and I forget if it was like Guitar World or one of those Guitar
for the Practicing Musician.
Guitar for the Practicing Musician, right? Mm-hmm. Which may have been just called Guitar at that point.
Maybe.
They sort of changed their name a couple of times. It was called the one flat concept, right? So you'd start off with Lydian, then you'd flat the 4, right, to natural, where you really naturally. But I think of it as flatting because you're going down 1 degree.
Yes.
But then you add 1 more flat. And then you're right, and all of a sudden you're in Mixolydian. And then you're in Dorian, and then you just keep going. And now you're in Locrian, right? The mode that no one can use, right? The most useless mode on the planet. And because there's like Guthrie Govan says, there's 3 major, there's 3 minor, and there's 1 just total junk. Don't even try. No one wins.
Right.
And,
Well, the thing about the sound of a Locrian scale, when you play a Locrian scale, the sound of it is so unstable,
right,
that it's hard to get the ear
to find a chord, to find a center.
Yeah, to hear it as a,
as a cohesive piece instead of a mash of notes. Yeah. But then we flat the 1,
right,
and we start all over again. And I was like,
right.
That was like, all right, he's onto something here.
Yeah.
I was like, that's pretty good.
Yeah.
That's pretty good. Because because I was like, where's this going? I'm like, yeah. And then you flat the 1, and I was like, oh my God. It's so true. It really is. And then you're in another key.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. Well, that's what happens. So that's the magic number sequence thing.
Yeah, maybe that's what it was called, actually.
Yeah, it might have been. Yeah.
But I totally remembered that, and it really sort of, because I knew about the modes quite a bit.
Yeah.
For years before that, but I had never seen it in that exact description, and I was like, well, there's a new perspective I hadn't seen before, and really helps me out in understanding like all this stuff.
Well, for me, it was one of those things that's like when I figured that out, I was almost angry because no one had shown that to me, and I was sure that everybody but me knew this already,
right,
and that they were waiting, and that when I would sort of raise my hands like, okay, I know this now, and they'd be like, oh, okay,
yeah.
But then what I found out was that it's a concept that most advanced guitar players are sort of vaguely aware of, but no one had ever really taken the time to actually explain it.
Right.
You know what I mean? And I think that was my contribution to that was taking this idea and actually giving a description that you can hang on to.
Yeah, I remember it. I mean, that that column was probably in the 90s, if I remember correctly.
That's right.
And so, we're talking a good 15 years, maybe 20 years, and I still remember it because it was impactful. I was like, oh yeah, well, this makes sense. This works. This is right.
Yeah, that's cool.
And so those little things, that you sort of remember over the years. Your second one, your more recent one.
Yeah. The more recent one is called improvisation target notes.
Okay.
Now, so the idea here is that when the chords change, like knowing scales and these days seems to be way more commonplace than it used to be.
Right.
15 years ago, people didn't know. It seemed like it wasn't. The information about how to play a Lydian scale wasn't as readily available, and there weren't as many people that knew how to play a Lydian scale. And it seems to me like these days, every kid that I come in contact with seems to already know how to play scales.
It's probably a testament to the internet.
Yeah. And, but one of the things that I do notice that happens is that, like if I'm, if I'm playing D minor 7th, to a B flat 7th chord, right?
Oh yeah, so B flat 7?
Yeah.
So where's that?
Yeah, not major 7, but just dominant 7th. Yeah. Okay. So if I'm playing that, right? So if I'm going to play D Aeolian. Okay. Now when I go to the B flat 7th, right?
Right.
One of my options is B flat Mixolydian. Or B flat Lydian flat 7.
Right, that sharp 4.
Okay, so one of the problems that comes up is, somebody's trying to. If you're just operating from scales, there's always this temptation to kind of go.
Right. Right.
And I'm playing the scales, but really there isn't any music coming out of it, right?
Right.
So the idea of target notes is that is that you decide ahead of time that when I get to this chord, I'm going to focus in on this note.
I turn my distortion off, so.
Okay, so D minor 7.
Yeah.
Okay, so now I'm gonna focus on this note for the D minor 7. Okay.
Yeah.
Now, when you go to the B flat 7, I'm going to focus on the A flat.
Right.
Now it's way more musical, isn't it?
Much more.
Go back to D minor 7. Okay, so that's use of target
That
notes.
sounded awesome, by the way.
Thank you. If you didn't hear it, it was awesome.
Yeah. Hopefully,
Hopefully
this works in post. It's gonna be a long video.
So that's that's basically the idea.
Right.
So if you were to play C sharp minor 7th, right?
Okay. So.
Good. This guy learns fast. Okay. Now here are the target notes. Okay, now keep going, and so basically all I was doing was just taking that chord progression, choosing ahead of time what notes I'm going to focus on when I get to each chord.
Right.
And then just connect them while improvising. So
Now, when you're choosing those notes.
Yep.
Right. Obviously, they can't occur in a vacuum because then it sounds like you're constantly playing new scales, right? So it's got to be some relationship to each other a little bit.
They just have to sound. They just have to sound
trying
good
to work
together.
this E and the B in because they're droning so much? No,
Not necessarily.
not necessarily. Okay.
They just have to be notes that sound good against the scale.
So are you targeting chord tones?
Yeah.
Yes
maybe.
and no, maybe.
Just notes that sound good against the chord.
Okay. Right.
I mean, there's no. I have to say there's no real method for the right way to pick a target note.
Right.
If anything, it's just the idea that that you're going to choose a note to land on ahead of time.
Okay.
And it comes from the simplest principle. You don't get in your car and just say, I'm going to go drive somewhere.
Right.
Nobody, people don't do that. They get in the car with the idea that, well, right now I'm going to drive to the store to get milk.
Right.
You know what I mean? So the driving they do is going to be
targeted. It's purposeful.
It's purposeful.
Right.
Okay? So if you're improvising, I think one of the things you want to do is, tell the emotional story somehow.